Hello everyone. We've got civil servants joining us from all around the world today, so a very big welcome wherever you're joining us from. It's 2:30 here in London, so a big hello from us. Welcome to the webinar on the operation of central project management teams. I'm Siobhan Benita. I'm going to be chairing the webinar today. I was previously a civil servant working here in Whitehall, so I've got lots of experience across a full range of those government departments, and I'm chairing this on behalf of Global Government Forum, which brings together these events for civil servants all around the world. So in terms of today's topics, governments regularly deliver projects and programs across a broad range of issues, from really complex, huge scale projects like Olympics, like big transport infrastructure projects, but also things like digitalizing our services or big recruitment initiatives. And some of our panel members will talk about different types of projects and programs today. But governments, despite the fact that they do this regularly, routinely as part of their work, really struggle sometimes with effective project and program management, whether that's working across different departmental boundaries or recruiting the skilled workforces that they need. And because of those challenges that they've found in the past, lots of national governments now are starting to centralise their project management approach. They're starting to create these centralised project offices. And today, our brilliant panel members, all of whom bring different experience in their own ways in terms of working on different types of projects and programmes, will talk about some of the benefits of that centralised approach and just talk about their experience of what works in good project management and maybe where some of the remaining issues lie. In terms of the format today, I will in a moment introduce each of our panel members, and then I will ask each of them in turn to give their opening presentation. After that, I'll choose some follow-up questions to kick off a discussion, but really this is also down to all of you. So please, you should see a Q&A function at the bottom of your screens. At any point, if you have a question that you would like to put to one of our panel members, please use that function there to send in your questions. And once our panel members have given their presentations and we've had a bit of a discussion, we will then take as many of the audience questions as we can in the time that we have today. But let me just introduce now our brilliant panel, because we have really great expertise here and a really diverse set of perspectives. So our first panel member will be Sonia Varga. Sonia is Head of Programme for the Ghana Operations Hub for UN Ops. Sonia has spent the last 17 years in the service of the United Nations agencies, working primarily in less developed countries. She's accredited in the Prince 2 methodology and passionate about deploying good practice in PPM for the benefit of the communities being served. Sonia joined the Ghana Multi-Country Office as Head of Programme in 2015. In her current role, she oversees a programme covering 5 countries in West Africa, with projects ranging from infrastructure development to large-scale procurement to technical assistance and project management. After Sonia, we'll hear from Amy Paris. Amy is a project manager and digital service expert in the US Digital Service at the Department of Health and Human Services in America. With a science and technology background, Amy has served in a range of specialist and policy roles in 2 presidential administrations and has also been an instructor at a number of colleges and universities. And in her current role, Amy leads a government centralised hiring strategy that looks to improve the way that government can recruit and retain skilled technologists into government departments. So she'll be bringing that perspective to her presentation. And then we'll hear from Alan Thompson. Alan is the Global PPM Product Ambassador responsible for representing Axelos externally with regards to their PPM products. He's a Prince 2 qualified project manager with over 25 years project and program management experience. So he brings a wealth of knowledge in terms of working with organizations in different sectors on a wide range of business and reform projects and programs. And we're really delighted to have Axelos with us here today as our knowledge partner for this webinar. And last but not least, we'll hear from Janice Vela. Janice is an architect and civil engineer currently working at the Ministry of Transport, Infrastructure and Capital Projects in Malta. And Janice has designed and monitored landscaping projects in Malta and Gozo for over 10 years, previously worked for a range of private companies and partnerships, and now works at the heart of the Maltese government. And together with a team of architects and planners, she's currently involved in the embellishment of Malta's largest national park. So again, that brings a very different type of experience in terms of project management. So there you've heard about our wonderful panel. Without further ado, I am going to hand over to Sonia for our first presentation.
Thank you very much, Siobhan. Can I just ask for a confirmation that our audience can hear me?
I think that's fine. I can certainly hear you, and I can see all our other panel members' thumbs up.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. To begin with, let me just give you a little background on UN OPS, which is the UN Office for Project Services. It's important to share the background because we're a little known UN agency amongst many very large ones in the UN system. We are an organization that helps our UN partners and the member states of the UN system to provide peace and security, humanitarian and development solutions, and assist in helping people build better lives in countries and achieve peace and the sustainable development goals. We're unique in the UN system for two main reasons. The first being that unlike many other UN agencies in the system, we are an entirely cost recovery based organization. So that really drives the way that we think and organize ourselves as an organization. And as a consequence of that, we also have an entirely implementation focused mandate. So that means that the degree of accountability that we have vis-a-vis our partners is very much similar to that of a private sector organization or contractor. But of course, we bring with us the core values of the UN system with a drive towards agility and versatility of the private sector thinking. Next slide, please. We are a global organization with a mandate in project management, the delivery of infrastructure development and procurement services across, at the moment, 80 countries around the world. We do have a particularly strong focus on fragile states, conflict-affected states, and least developed countries. And for those that are on the call, they can imagine that the working environments that we operate in are highly complex. But nevertheless, next slide, please. We are implementing. Last year, we delivered more than 900 projects with a value of over $2.3 billion worth of support for our partners, mainly in very complex environments, but with an incredibly diverse sectoral range. Everything from health to renewable energy, transport, agriculture, governance and capacity building, urban and evidence-based public investment planning. If you can imagine it, we have probably implemented it somewhere in the world. And that's really, our versatility allows us to adjust and respond to our partners' needs as they evolve. Next slide, please. In the Africa region, we're currently present in more than 40 countries with nearly 250 ongoing projects valued at $300 million. Again, we deliver in the Africa region projects across these three main service lines, being project management, infrastructure, and procurement. And we have a very clearly strong presence in fragile states. In the West Africa subregion, we're divided into two subregions. The first being Anglophone West Africa, and the second being Francophone West Africa. As Siobhan mentioned, I'm responsible for the Anglophone West Africa subregion, which covers 5 countries: Sierra Leone, Liberia, the Gambia, Ghana, and Nigeria. And on average, we are implementing between 15 and 25 projects each year. At the moment, we have 23 ongoing projects and in a wide range of sectors. Next slide, please. As a global organization with a mandate in project management and the values of the UN, you can imagine that operational excellence and international benchmarking has become part of our DNA. The reason being that there are a number of other UN agencies who also have technical mandates, and we have a responsibility to deliver services to them and the member states of the UN system with the highest possible standards of integrity and service delivery. So we are ISO 9001 certified, among other ISO certifications, and we deploy a variety of different Axelos best practice methodologies in the organization and delivery of our projects and programs. Next slide, please. What does this all mean? With the global reach, it means that we have to take decisions around the way that we organize ourselves, and also because we have a project management based mandate, that means we also need to ebb and flow and grow and contract along with the needs of the countries that we're serving, as well as the demand for our services. So we have for several years now adopted the P3O methodology, the Portfolio Program and Project Office methodology, to guide our organization and really strive towards the operational excellence agenda that we're aiming to seek. So we have some reflections in terms of the benefits of a program management office. And I would stress here that we will focus on the program management office because of the decentralized and multi-country nature of our operations. We create new project teams as we enter into new country offices, and we close them down as the projects evolve. So we need to also have a certain degree of agility in terms of the way that we operate our business. And for that, the P3O methodology has served us well thus far. Some reflections in terms of what has worked well for us in terms of creating a PMO. The first things first is an aspect of efficiency. It allows us to share resources, both technical and support functions across multiple projects and even country offices. It also allows us to have the outlook over a diverse program through the maintenance of dashboards and the establishment of monitoring tools. It also allows us to filter and tailor knowledge and learning based on the unique needs of our program at any one time, and assist and facilitate efforts towards continuous improvement in the delivery of our individual projects, looking at it from a wider organizational perspective. What's important to recognize is that there are a great deal of benefits in terms of tailoring, and I'm sure Alan will be talking about that a little bit later, that the program management office methodology allows for tailoring to suit the local context up to certain limits. And there we've seen the benefits of those adjustments when needed. And finally, to harmonize our approach and strive towards delivering the same quality of service in all countries to all partners, irrespective of the complexity, value, and coverage of individual projects. So this aspect of maturity is something that we see highly beneficial from a PMO perspective. That being said, there are certain dangers. The first is that if not managed very carefully, the establishment of a centralized program management office can lead to inefficiencies, in particular by overextending the teams that you have on the ground. But the flip side of that coin can be delayed decision making about contracting, and thus lost efficiency in terms of your human resource capability. In our case, because we have two layers, there can be some risk of overlapping roles and substitution that needs to be monitored very carefully, ensuring clear decision segregation of roles in the delivery of different assignments. One other aspect which I believe could be very important to keep an eye on is the lost context. The further we are away from the field, the further we tend to understand the challenges that our colleagues face in delivering projects at a very localized level. And as a result, we have to strive towards resisting process-driven approaches in favor of delivery-oriented solutions. And as a result, there is a risk of missed opportunities that we need to be mindful of. I'll move on to the next slide, please. So what are some of the lessons that we've learned from our experience with the program management model in at least Anglophone West Africa? First things first, in order to be successful, you need to have strong governance. For that, you need to have clearly delineated responsibilities for governance, including mechanisms for performance monitoring and oversight. We use Prince2 as our main model, so we have project boards for every single project that we have. Likewise, we also need to have very strong resource management systems in place. That will allow you to contract and expand in optimal or preferred time, and therefore allow for the most efficiency in terms of the resources that we use. And of course, as a UN agency, we are entrusted with the resources of donor countries. So it makes it all the more important to be accountable for the utilization. Knowledge management is also something that is highly valued and can be consolidated through a program management structure. Likewise, in terms of retention, and as a international public sector organization, the aspect of document retention and audit are not negligible, and the benefits thereof are quite well documented at this stage. That being said, we always need to continuously justify our structure and our existence. It is nevertheless, Program Management Office is nevertheless a temporary organization and should be treated as such and continuously reviewed from a benefits point of view. But now, that being said, it also offers a strong vehicle for building and consolidating talent within an organization that we recognize as a big takeaway from our experience thus far. Allow me to stop there and say thank you and hand it back to Siobhan. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sonia. That was a brilliant presentation to open with, because I think you gave a really good summary of the potential benefits of the PMO approach, but some of the potential pitfalls as well. So I really like that sense of allows sharing of resources, good overview of a project or a program, and you can then really monitor well, but also that ability to then bespoke and tailor some of those projects, really important. But equally, you flagged up some of the potential downfalls, so the bureaucracy that might come in, and actually the distance from a project can be a problem as well. So really good. And also I think, which the other panel members now will be able to pick up on, just the sheer breadth of different types of projects that people are dealing with, and what is a project, what isn't a project. And I know we've got people in our audience from all sorts of departments, all sorts of policy areas as well. So these core skills can really be transferred across all of those. And good to see the link with Axelos in your slides as well. So I'm sure Alan will pick up on that later. Okay, now I am going to hand over to Amy. Amy, over to you for your presentation.
Thank you, Siobhan. Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Paris. I'm a product manager with the U.S. Digital Service. We like to think of ourselves as a startup group within the federal government. We're the folks who somewhat famously fixed healthcare.gov during the Obama administration when it crashed. We're currently partnering with the U.S. Office of Personnel Management to conduct what we call SME, or subject matter expert-based qualification assessments to improve hiring across the federal government. Next slide, please. So in the US Federal Competitive Service, where the average public, has the opportunity to apply for federal jobs, our statistics show that only 53% of federal hiring actions result in a job offer being made. That's a pretty poor result, and we'd like to see that change. Next slide, please. So the game changer, and this might be shocking to some of you who are not from the United States, it has been unusual for agencies to believe that they can make applicants prove to us that they are qualified before we hire them. This is a big game changer. It's always been in the law, it's always been in the policy, and what our project management office has been doing is sort of singing the praises of existing efficiencies, existing rules that can be used in agencies to accomplish this goal. Next slide, please. So our essential PMO for qualification verification, again, this is conducted by the U.S. Digital Service, but we work with a variety of federal agencies, and we'll see some of the agencies we work with later on. The process is pretty grueling, and this speaks to something that Sonia said in her presentation, which is that you have to be careful about exhausting your resources when you're working with a PMO. We conduct this job analysis workshop that links together subject matter experts, human resources specialists, and hiring managers who actually are the folks who want to hire people into their offices, into their federal offices. This is a 2-day workshop. It is one of the most exhausting processes I've ever been through in my entire life, and you need to make sure that throughout this process that everyone feels like they are empowered to take time for themselves, that they're not being constantly pushed. If the central PMO pushes too hard, you risk alienating your stakeholders, and we obviously don't want to do that. We post our job announcement on USA Jobs. Recently, we posted a job announcement for government-wide data science hiring. You can Google that and look into it further. That job announcement is since closed. We had hundreds of applicants. What we can say is that the job announcement closed after it reached its maximum number of people. So it was over 500 applicants we had for these positions. We go into a process of resume review, where we have 2 subject matter experts review each resume against the established core competencies and proficiencies established in job analysis. So the PMO is supporting these subject matter experts in establishing these competencies and proficiencies, and then making sure they have all the tools that they need to actually conduct a resume review. So this is an example set of numbers. This doesn't come from a specific agency, but let's say you started out with 200 applicants, maybe 98 of them will clear the resume review process, just as a somewhat random example. Then once those folks clear resume review, we'll go into an assessments phase. You can have 1 or 2 assessments. The goal here is, again, not to place too much burden on the applicants. So we're looking at stakeholders, not just as the folks that we're working directly with, but we want to look at sort of our user focus. And this is a core goal of the US Digital Service, is we want to look at users holistically. We don't want to just say, oh, our users are the folks in agencies, but no, our users are actually the American people. So we want to make sure that the assessments we provide to them are not overly complex. We're looking at, during the coronavirus pandemic, we've got folks who work from home, who are taking care of children, who might have full-time jobs, and we don't want to make it impossible for them to apply because that'll lower the diversity of our applicant pool. So we go through those 2 rounds of assessments. Maybe one is written and maybe one is a verbal interview. And then we eventually issue what's called a hiring certificate that has all of the qualified applicants on it, broken down by best qualified, well qualified, and qualified. And that will contain a number of veterans and non-veterans, veterans being former US military officers or enlisted personnel who completed their tours of service and were released with an honorable discharge. Next slide, please. So this PMO is pretty complex. Yes, we are based at the US Digital Service, but we're actually very tightly integrated across a number of agencies. We have within the Executive Office of the President of the United States, we have the Office of Performance and Personnel Management working with us. We have 2 offices within the Office of Personnel Management, HRS or Human Resources Services, and the Office of Planning and Policy Analysis. Then we work with the individual agencies. So in the case of one of the most recent offices that I helped support a hiring action for, it was the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Service. They were looking to hire data scientists to improve the quality of Medicare services being offered to folks who are in nursing homes, so older Americans, and making sure that they get the health care that they need. So we work with their Office of Human Capital, their Data and Analytics Office, and also the Center for Clinical Standards and Quality, which is to a large extent a bunch of medical officers. So we're talking about coordinating amongst a vast variety of teams, and this is something I know that PMOs often run into, is when you're trying to coordinate across, technical professionals, so data professionals, you're trying to coordinate across project management professionals and sort of policy professionals, but also now medical officers, so doctors. These folks don't often speak a common language, and it's our job to do that translation. Next slide, please. So here's an example, 2 examples. These are real world of what we've been able to accomplish at 2 agencies in the federal government. You can see the number of subject matter experts and HR personnel who were involved in job analysis, the agencies involved. So EPA is the Environmental Protection Agency, CMS is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. You can see the number of folks who applied into resume review, then the number of folks who completed their first round of written assessments, then the folks who completed their first interview, and then finally the applicants who ended up on the certificates. So for EPA, we went down from 112 applications down to 8 qualified applicants, of which 4 offers were made. Sorry, we went forward an extra slide. And then 19 qualified folks at CMS with 10 offers. Next slide, please. So one of the things that the PMO does to make this process easier for agencies is we give them third-party tools. And in the federal government, this is a long process. This is not, you can't just go out and say, oh yeah, we're going to use this third-party tool with no, testing of, say, issues of information security. We want to make sure that we're not going to leak applicants, personally identifiable information, out into the public through a hack or some other event. So we have to go through a lot of rigorous testing. But we have found 2 tools, one for scheduling interviews and one for conducting asynchronous interviews that allow us to get through that process quicker. Next slide, please. We've also made 2 additional tools that we've actually constructed in-house within the PMO, a website that allows agencies to understand the process better, and a resume review tool to speed up that process. Next slide, please. And this has resulted in very strong outcomes at agencies. You can read a lot of articles in media about it taking months and months to hire people into the federal government. And here you can see it's taking anywhere from 5.5 to 6 weeks. Next slide, please. And then finally, this is sort of the scope of the various offices we've worked with. I won't go through all these acronyms for those of you who aren't in the United States federal government, but suffice it to say, this is a number of different agencies hiring across a number of different positions. And again, we have to be adaptable and flexible to work with a whole wide range of different types of applicants that we're trying to hire. And then finally, next slide. So that concludes my presentation. Again, thank you for your time, and I will turn it back over to Siobhan.
Thank you so much, Amy. I think that's really good because it really complements what Sonia was saying hers, and it's a very different type of project that you're running, a very specific need that you're addressing there in terms of recruiting and retaining skilled people into those government departments. But it does show there's similarities in terms of dealing with complexity across different departments and organisations. I know working at the heart of government how difficult that can be, and those differences. Maybe we'll pick up on some of those cultural differences, I think, in the discussion afterwards. But also they're just a very clear the benefits if you get this right. How you can speed up processes, how you can have recognised standards, how you can get departments working much more effectively together. So all of that's really good. Thanks so much. And now I'm going to hand over to Alan for Alan's presentation. Thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Maria. And first of all, delighted to be here as a knowledge partner today. Very, very, very happy to be here. And so we're going to maybe have a quick update about what Axelos does. Can I have the next slide, please? So just a quick introduction about myself. Before I joined Axelos in 2014, I had over 25 years project and program management experience, actually using across oil and gas, energy and utilities, and education. So quite a lot of experience. Hence, I was attracted to come and work for Axelos in May 2014. And I took the role at Axelos because I believe that if you've got enough experience, best practice supports both the end user of the PPM function and the organization. So feeding back the knowledge. So I use this as a conduit to basically feed my best practice feedback to the benefit of all the end users. And so next slide, please. So what do Axelos products do? In essence, what we want to do for organizations, and we try and split the answer into three parts, is that we try to develop skills and processes to help organizations successfully transform their business, help them with solutions. And I think Sonia mentioned some of the products that we've used, and for example, P3O being for program management office, and there's various others. But it's to help businesses succeed in transforming where they need to be. The way we do that is by basically we have a very, very large and ecosystem that we engage with, and we collaborate with the ecosystem to produce the best practice guides, and that's our aim. And at the individual level, we basically generate best practice guides so that individuals have the confidence to effectively apply them. So that's the three ideas between why we do what we do in this challenging environment. Next slide, please. So this is a particularly crucial time for organizations and governments. Governments are facing extraordinary pressures due to the COVID-19 pandemic. But as we move to the light at the end of the tunnel, they must be ready to face the challenges ahead, and a lot of that involves catch up to where they should have been, etc. It's really important here that organizations need to be very careful with their specialist resources. These will continue to be scarce, and as a result, they have to be managed carefully to avoid resource exhaustion, etc. So there's a finite resource in an organization that can be involved in changing where the organization is to get it from A to B. So organizations need to be very, very careful, and that's a challenge, and it's got to be done correctly as well. Next slide, please. So government strategic plans. So we were looking at the highest level of government within the strategic plans that they've got to actually have program and project management built into those targets. So as a result of that, and the reasons for this is because programs and projects are going to be the vehicle which basically allows organizations to progress and basically change where they are. And it should be an evolutionary and incremental process and seen as work in progress. So what you're basically trying to do with your government or your organization is that project and program management is endorsed at the senior level from the C-suite down, etc. So for these strategic plans, include scheduling, they include budgetary control and utilization of scarce resource, and that will be key. And that goes back to the fact if you've got scarce resource, you can only do so much incremental change over a period of time. Another challenge that governments face is the budget is available and adequate to fund activities. And basically, with the adoption of portfolio practices, program frameworks, or project methods, which help them implement the required changes, and if these are built into the governmental strategic plans, then they've got the support of the boards or the government hierarchy. So program frameworks or project methods which help them implement the required changes need to have that level of presence. And basically, to do this properly, these activities need to be funded from the strategic budget of the government. So it's just not something that needs to be done. It becomes the routine way that the government actually operates. Next slide, please. We've heard from Sonia and Amy about the importance of the PMO, and it's vital that organisations and governments have a functional PMO to facilitate the implementation of a method or framework effectively throughout the business. So a facilitating model of the PMO should be adopted to provide technical support to business units and ensure that the management of the programs and projects are basically in line with the chosen framework or method. So it's basically to support the teams. The PMO must be involved in the facilitation, development, planning, monitoring, advising and supporting of all projects and programs. It's important to note that. It supports the program and project managers to ensure they manage their programs and projects using the central approved method or framework. And it's important to note that this basically is not a police and enforcement. It's basically helping the operational organizational units to use the methods more effectively. In addition, this will also include tailoring advice for the types of project involved, in addition to the coordination of post-project implementation reviews. And that's an important role that PMOs need to face, is the post-implementation reviews, what went well, so that there's a continual evolvement of basically the organization's learning from what went well and avoiding what went wrong. There'll also be, the PMO would have defined stages, approvals for programs and projects, including the selection and prioritization stages, including the approval of business cases and approved program and project lists by government senior management, including stage gates, etc. It's also important because the level of investment and the scale which governments face, that it basically it'd be advisable to have maturity assessments are also suggested using the Axelos P3M3 maturity model, for example, to basically tell the organizations where they are and where they need to be and how to get there. And this should be supported and run by the PMO as recognized as a center of excellence. So PMO can't be just a policing department. It needs to be there to support and enable the business. Next slide, please. So collaboration across the organization. I mean, this is hugely important to break down silos, and it should really be endorsed from the C-suite level within the organization or at government level. And what we're looking at particular types of behavior within the organization. Developing and ensuring the program and project management guidelines are implemented across the entire government organization. Controlled by the PMO, not policed, controlled to make sure we have got consistency across the organization as a whole. providing and maintaining appropriate PM tools and best practice so that can then be shared across the organisation, facilitating program and project management teams in adopting and adapting best practice methods or frameworks across the government, and also seeking to empower them where appropriate. So it's about facilitating to make sure that everything's been done consistently to make sure that the return on investment is going to be correct. Summarising and endorsing the use of lessons learned to improve future projects, and providing aid and assistance where necessary, coordination, and maintaining and providing a central filing system and historical reference for future products and audit purposes. So that's why there needs to be this level of collaboration across the organisation. Next slide, please. When we look at the environment, we need to create an environment in the organisation or government team where there's transparency, there's no silos, there's trust, there's collaboration, rich communication to reduce the effects of communication issues, which are still prevalent, self-organisation to improve the effectiveness across the organisation, and exploration within teams to resolve issues as quickly and robustly as possible, which are then fed back to the central team itself. Next slide, please. So just as I begin to wrap up, what we've also basically put onto the website, this is an NHS case study using our P3M3 maturity model. And this case study looks at how the NHS assessed its portfolio programme and project management at a time of organisational change. It uses Axelov's P3M3 model it was used to evaluate its organisational ability, but more importantly, it highlighted areas for development and to strategize an improved approach. Please have a read. It's quite an interesting read, but it shows an organisation using maturity to endorse where it is, where it needs to be, but also highlight areas for improvement. Next slide, please. So, and thank you, and questions we'll deal with later.
Thank you so much, Alan. We will indeed. Thank you very much. Really good to get that perspective of somebody working in a joint venture with central government as well. And I really like the way you framed it there about PMOs not being about enforcement, not being about policing, but very much about support to the people who are delivering on those projects. And again, something that's come up now, I think Sonia mentioned it in particular, about how a PMO can play that really important role of helping teams to bespoke and tailor the work that they're doing. So, and also the breaking down of silos, which I think we'll pick up on in our discussions. So thanks very much, Alan. And last but not least, I am now going to come to Janice to tell us about the work that she's doing in Malta. Over to you, Janice.
Thank you so much, Oban. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sonia Varga, and I'm an architect. I have been in the landscaping industry for over 10 years, and I've been working in the public sector now for over a year. Before, I used to work with a landscaping company, and we used to do work basically for the government. I have been involved in big projects like big road thoroughfares, roundabouts, and even large public spaces in Malta. Throughout this presentation, I'm going to show you a couple of insights that I have done on this topic, generally going through the challenges and the tools of project management and how these can be applied to have a centralized government institution for project management. At the end, I'm going to show you a couple of landscaping projects that I've worked on and discuss the involvement of project management. The first slide, please. So, yes, the first slide. Here, I'm going to discuss the difference in project management from until a few years ago to now. I think before, the project management was mainly focused to deliver the projects on time and to a specific budget. But nowadays, people want more. of life and of their investment, and therefore they are pushing for more profit, for more quality and success, and hopefully with less difficulties in the process. What is also interesting locally is that the big companies, the big contractors, they are engaging a project management entity, and also I can see that the projects are more successful and more easygoing. On to the next slide, please. So here we're going to discuss some challenges that I've seen popping up in government offices, and how having the project management team on board can be a solution and provide excellent solutions for these challenges that we're going to discuss here. I think that the main challenges for the government institutions are the complex bureaucratic environments and the ingrained processes, and also the incremental thinking, which unfortunately they are very difficult to avoid, and yet they leave no space for any innovation or change. So the project manager, if it is involved in a project, can be a separate entity, and that allows him to be more flexible and also maybe bypass certain administrative processes and be the medium for change and innovation through proposing new approaches, both for problem solving, but also to reach the desired goals. Another challenge that we're faced with are the big economic challenges that the government are faced. And so the project manager has to work with a limited budget. He has to be skilled and creative enough to do more with less. Another challenge for the project management is to coordinate the different people. People with different perspectives, different academic backgrounds, and different knowledge. We all know that the projects can be very tiring and very intense, and therefore it is important that the project manager brings all the people together through excellent communication and mediation skills. I think this is very important to get them all pulling the same rope. The next slide, please. So yes, here I'm going to go over the 4 major resources that the project manager has in hand, and I'm going to highlight as we go along how having him on board can benefit the landscaping industry. The first one is capital. So basically, the project manager has the needs to organize the funds for the project, both for the project per se, but also for engaging the best professionals. He is also, he can keep an ongoing track record of how the budget is going, and he has to ensure that it is not consumed too early. Landscaping, to put you in the picture, landscaping is a task which is normally carried out towards the end of the implementation of the project. So having someone who actually organizes and monitors the expenditure will make sure that in the end the allocated budget is still available for the landscapers to use in their projects. Unfortunately, on numerous occasions in the past, landscapers were provided with a very limited budget to work with, and because, of course, the funds would have been exhausted by the end of the project. Another important resource is people. The project manager, of course, will have the job to find the best people to work for the project. And again, landscaping has a lot to gain here, because with the project manager on board, there is a high probability that the landscapers are contacted early in the process and are part of the design team. So they are actually in time to propose certain construction details and also infrastructural services such as the irrigation systems. Unfortunately, in the past, landscapers were contacted at a later stage where planting would need to happen, and therefore they would be too late basically to have things done the proper way. I've been involved in projects where, for example, the client wants big trees, but the designer, being not so knowledgeable about landscaping, did not provide enough soil depth for the trees to be planted. Or else, for example, nobody thought about providing water for the vegetation to be planted. So being involved at the beginning, at the planning and the design stage, the architects and the landscape professionals can make their contribution from the very first parts of the project. The project manager can also help here by finding the best people that would be right for the job. And again, and this is not an easy job when it comes to landscaping, because a lot of professionals, they are already working with specific landscaping companies, and there are very few professionals around. Even when it comes to the skilled labor, the skilled workforce, most of the people, they haven't been trained on landscaping and horticulture, and therefore it's not the first time that in Malta the project manager has to look abroad to get people to do certain specific jobs like pruning, site overseeing, etc., etc. The third resource is policies related to best practices and local regulations. And the last but very important resource is infrastructure. I divided that into two, which are the organization knowledge and also technology. Organization knowledge basically is the sum of the knowledge contained within a project management institution, and it comes generally from the knowledge of the field and also from the experience that the project management team has on the landscaping. And here we've had a lot of project management teams that have worked on landscaping projects, and they are now very knowledgeable about landscaping and can help us landscapers a lot, because they know what to look for and how to steer the projects. On to the next slide, please. I'm going to quickly show you this garden, which is in Quisisana in Slima. It was a governmental project, a landscaping project. It was done in December 2010. And again, we had the design is very nice, of course, but there are a couple of issues that if a project management company was involved, we could have solved a lot of small design tweaks that would make the project a lot better, also in the maintenance stage of the project. Next slide, please. This is showing the National Park of Taqali, a project which we are currently working on. And together with a big team of architects and planners and landscape professionals, there is a team which is taking care of the project management, and it is doing a fantastic job. The project is running quite smoothly. And I think, to conclude, all in all, I think the future for Malta is to have a centralized project management team, because there are many benefits that can be enjoyed overall. And I think we as architects and decision planners have to leave enough space for the project management to do their work, be creative, and push forward change, flexibility, and innovation. On to you, Shaban. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a nice evening.
Thank you so much, Janice. And again, I love this panel because we've got such different perspectives coming in, and it's really good, I think, there to get your views on, while you mentioned some of the same things that the other panelists have talked about in terms of that centralized approach helping to overcome some of those challenges that are seen to bureaucracy and the ingrained way of thinking. You've raised the other issue around being kind of the landscaping element of a project, which comes at the end, how traditionally maybe budgets are spent up front, so there's not money left for those things done at the end, but also people who need to be consulted at the beginning for something that's not going to happen till the end of the project, how that can get overlooked as well if project management isn't done properly. So thank you so much. We've got a couple of questions already coming in. They've been to individual panel members at the moment. I think there's one in there for you, Alan, which you might want to pick up if you can look in the chat, or I can mention it afterwards. But if you are now watching, we've got nearly 100 people watching at the moment. Please do send in any questions that you've got using the Q&A function. I'm just going to kick off by coming back to our panel members on something that struck me that you all talked about, and that was the way that project management offices, if they do this well, can help support teams in terms of bringing together effectively different organisations, different departments, if you're working in a government setting, private sector and public sector working together. And I know you talked a lot about the methodologies, making sure there's a consistent methodology that everybody agrees with and understands, but how much of good project management is just about understanding the different cultures that people might bring to this project, whether they're working in a different country, a department, or an organisation, and to what extent is it important that those different cultures are appreciated and worked with and worked across, and how much is that part of what you all do you think, in terms of good project managers? I'm going to change the order a little bit. I'm going to go to Amy first. So your thoughts on the kind of, you know, cultural aspects or different communications, those kind of things.
Sure. I mean, I think the culture of the U.S. Digital Service is massively different than most federal agencies. We were 5 years old, you know, so in federal government terms, we are brand new, we're babies. Most federal agencies are decades, if not hundreds of years old at this point. Been around since the birth of the nation. So they have very established cultures, and we have to be very aware as we go into an individual agency that their mission may dictate different changes in our approach. So as an example, I just had the first opportunity to work with the State Department, which I had not done before, and they've got embassies all over the world. And one of the things we have to realize with them is they have some unique location requirements that the rest of government doesn't have. Most of government works in Washington, D.C. The State Department is all over the place. So there's a certain amount of awareness I have to have there. So this brings me back to something that actually I think has been touched upon a little bit by the other panelists, which is when you're dealing with different cultures, when you're dealing with, you know, mixing the private sector and the public sector, when you're mixing different cultures across federal agencies, one thing that I've learned, and this comes to me mostly from my previous experience working in the Executive Office of the President of the United States, the Office of the Federal CIO, in a previous job, was adaptability and flexibility, and making sure that even though you have robust systems and you want to have those robust systems, you have to have that flexibility to change if someone comes in to a project who doesn't fit into that established system, but you want to bring them on board. They're an important stakeholder and you want to work with them. So one of the things I would say to PMOs in general is have your robust established systems, but don't make them so rigid that they break when someone comes in who doesn't adapt to that system.
Great. Fantastic. Sonia, I could see you nodding there. Did you want to add anything to what Amy said there?
Thanks, Siobhan. Amy, you mentioned it in your earlier presentation that there are times when you feel as though you're the interpreter of different disciplines, and I can highly relate. As part of a UN organization, there are multiple tiers, but in particular, there's aspects of multidisciplinarity that is really driving our work. Of course, as a an organization that needs to be transparent, you have to balance operational delivery with compliance, which at times can be a tense relationship. But in addition to that, as a UN organization, we're also working in different countries and working with multicultural teams. So the number and diversity of the layers is almost infinite. And I agree with what Amy has just said, that the systems need to be robust, but they also need to be agile enough to allow for this continued delivery. And I think Peter asked the question on how do we monitor our benefits, and we have to recall, at least in the case of UN Ops, we're delivering projects for the benefit of improving the lives of the people we serve. So we have a high degree of social responsibility in the way that we go about doing our work. So we have to maintain a results-oriented and solution-oriented posture as we try to strive also to achieve operational excellence, transparency, and accountability, because those aspects are also extremely important for an organization like the UN. So it's a delicate balance, but it's one that is really important to continue striving towards. And tailoring, as we mentioned earlier, is something that is an instrument to allow us to do that.
Great, thank you. Janice, I'm going to come to you because I want to ask this one to Alan last. But Janice, what do you think about this sense of, to what extent are different cultures an issue in terms of effective project delivery?
Yes, I think it all boils down to a good communication, which we hope that the centralized project management would be able to take care of. Speaking from the landscaping sector, I think when we get people from different countries, they have to be a little bit flexible and understand that our climate and our soils and our vegetation are different from the ones that they are used to, and certain techniques, even when it comes to pruning and the uprooting of trees, they are different from what they are used to in the countries. So I think, yes, there needs to be a little bit of training and a little bit of general knowledge about landscaping when somebody who's foreigner comes to Malta to give out his services.
Janice, you're making me yearn to go on holiday with all this talk of Malta.
You're very much welcome to come.
Alan, anything you want to add to this sense of how do you get people from different backgrounds to work together effectively?
Well, I think it's a really massive point, and you really need to take into consideration the cultural aspects of it. Having managed some global programs in the past, you've got to take into consideration, the different holidays, different aspects, build it into the plan, build it into expectation. The big challenge that we've had actually is like looking at governance in certain countries, whereby people on projects are got senior representation on projects, and because they've got a particular role in a particular project, they are basically senior to some of the operational people who are more senior in the organization to them. So they have major issues about making key decisions, but from a cultural perspective, the person's more senior, older, therefore they should be waiting for them. So you've got to take that into consideration. So as a result of that, we had to build some guidance to help our project board members across the world. So it's okay, you can do this, and this is the guidelines. You're not being rude, you're just asking for updates, etc. And because that governance needs to work very, very effectively, and it needs to be making, and good governance is about, getting good decisions made, timely decisions, and the right decisions. But when you're building up your plan, you've got to take on board cultural aspects, and it's really important of your team, and make sure that's been built in as well. And it's even more pronounced now as we work in remote environments, whereby we just have this two-dimensional device at the moment to talk to, rather than it'd be a totally different dynamic if we were sitting in the same room talking about what we're talking about. And it puts a lot more onus on on the project manager to do that. But hugely, if you get this wrong or you don't do it, it can have enormous consequences on you and your project output.
I like that, the sense of trying to preempt and build it in. We've got a really good question coming from Peter for all of the panel. I don't want to put any of you on the spot, but if you are happy to answer this question, have any of your projects exceeded budgets by a significant amount, and what was done to address this? And I think maybe this, looking at the time, this might be the last one. So I think maybe if you haven't had a project that's exceeded budgets, maybe you could give some reflections on why do you think so many projects do run over budget, especially government-led projects. I'm going to shake up the order a little bit again. Alan, I'll come to you first on this one.
Okay.
So in terms of projects, have you worked on any projects that have exceeded budgets? And if so, what did you do about it? But also, why do you think governments struggle to keep their projects on budget?
I think the reason governments struggle is because of the size. It's a scale, it's a complex, it's a constantly changing stakeholder landscape, and that's coupled by the fact that it's politically driven as well, and governments change, etc. And what I actually see happening is that because you've got these changes in stakeholders and sponsors, and people tend to forget why they're actually doing the project. And basically, we've done it because we've always done it. And basically, what actually happens is that the reason for doing the project becomes lost. And what can happen then is that the project doesn't deliver what it was supposed to, and it's went over budget as well. But the major, from the research that we've done, the major reason that projects go over budget and don't deliver the scope is this, because at startup they get it wrong. And projects are particularly horrid because if you get it wrong at the start, there's very little you can do. There's some things you can do, but if you get it wrong at the start, it's usually you don't realize it's gone wrong to halfway through deployment or implementation, and it's usually too late. So we put a lot of emphasis on that. And what happens with with large organizations and governments, from my experience, is that you've got so many people involved. People can't be there who are key stakeholders, who've got key knowledge, but we've got exact timescales. Yeah, we'll catch up with them after we've got the scoping document done. And what usually happens is that doesn't happen. So this person who needed to be a key element of the startup wasn't there, and as a result, the foundations are wrong, okay, and the product just overruns.
Making sure that everybody is involved at the start. Sonia, you talked in your presentation about the fact that you're delivering on behalf of government, so even more pressure on you to make sure that money and the budgets are kind of well monitored. And is this an issue that you've experienced yourself of projects overrun, and why do you think that is such a kind of perennial problem for project management?
Thank you. I was hoping we wouldn't have to get to that question. It's a very sensitive one. I would say that I've been quite privileged to be able to avoid the pitfalls of running over budget, but it is something that naturally can happen in a complex project management environment. And I say that I have managed to avoid it because the governance and the performance monitoring systems that we've put in place are very robust. So from the very beginning, we have extremely rigorous budget management systems that are monitored at multiple layers to make sure that we're continuously interrogating the health of the project throughout its life cycle. And when we do detect issues, because we have to recognize that project management also involves a great deal of issues management, that issues are appraised from that financial perspective, as well as timeline perspective and scope, among other variables, systematically whenever we encounter them, so that if there are any pressures that are placed on the budget, those can then be escalated for timely direction and decision making. So there's a very strong interface between the performance monitoring side and the governance. And I fully appreciate what Alan just mentioned about the availability of decision makers and the importance of their genuine participation in the governance structure. And this is something that we often grapple with in our operating environments, because we're working with high-level government officials, many of whom are extremely difficult to secure meetings with, but we need their input for decision making. So the more agile we are in terms of issues identification, escalating exceptions, and offering viable solutions, then the more effective we can be to mitigate the risk of over budget, or alternately reflect on the benefits of either budget increases or descoping or rescoping or rescaling. So, and that's why I say I'm lucky enough to have avoided that, because we have in place, at least in our office, a fairly comprehensive system that allows us to do that effectively.
Great, thanks, Sonia. Amy, was there anything you wanted to add on this tricky issue of going over budget?
Sure. First of all, what Alan said about the hugeness of federal government, of government in general. And I mean, I don't know if you all are aware, but, the United States might have recently gone through some political change. So yes, political change and turnover in priorities is a real thing that we have to deal with on a, every 4 to 8 years basis. I think the biggest thing that we run into, so we have something called the Government Accountability Office, or GAO. They release reports every year that say, such and such a project has run over by millions of dollars or billions of dollars. And that's due to a variety of issues. It could be mismanagement, it could be contractors that are overcharging. There are a number of reasons for it, too many to go into. But the one that I will focus on is government, at least in the United States, still needs to adapt to modern methodologies and practices. At USDS, we very highly advocate for agile processes. And so we try to come up with minimum viable products. We try to make sure that we're executing in small chunks, and we're having stand-ups, and we're, in measuring our results in an acceptable framework that allows us to correct for problems as they arise. We were told one time, and I will not mention the agency that told us this, they said, "Great, you're doing agile, that's wonderful, give us your 3-year plan." And we were like, what? Like, I don't think you understand agile. Like, you don't do it, like you don't do a 3-year plan, like that's not how that works. So there's still some translating that we need to do in project management to educate sort of oversight groups and entrenched government groups to say, this is how agile works, this is how it can benefit government, this is how it can make projects deliver more effectively and on budget and on time. And I think that education work is something PMOs have to do and perhaps haven't done enough of.
Great, thanks, Amy. And Janice, finally, you did mention budgets as well in your presentation, because you said landscaping often gets overlooked at the end. What's the one thing you would like to see change then to make that not happen?
Yes, I could opt for having a lot of research done prior to actually starting the project, because a lot of projects run out of budget because there are things that crop up because a certain analysis was not done properly, maybe because funds would be lost, or maybe the election is coming up. So yes, I think the solution to this is proper planning and proper research, proper site analysis in my case. And yes, practically that's proper planning, and that would practically because all the other things can be accounted for and can be sort of thought of from before, but you have to have excellent research done prior to the initiation of the projects. That's what I think.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, I'm just looking at the clock, and unfortunately, as is always the case with an excellent discussion, we are pretty much out of time. I wanted to say a huge thank you. It's so good to have such an experienced panel here, and you've all given up so much of your time. Could I just end literally with kind of 10 seconds from each of you before we go? Alan, you mentioned with the pandemic, governments are going to be even more stretched in terms of resources. Just from all of you, are you confident that in that kind of future building back better with even more limited resources, do you think governments are going to appreciate even more the need for good project management, or do you think they might revert to kind of a more silo mentality? So are you confident, are you optimistic, or are you pessimistic that we're going to get better at project management or not? I guess that's my final question. Amy, I'm going to come to you. Optimistic or pessimistic?
I have to be exceedingly optimistic. We're looking forward to continuing to expand upon the work that we've already done, and branching into new places that we can, work with new agencies and new groups. I hope that everyone looks at the digital service model and sees that it can be useful in governments around the world. Thank you all for your time.
Thanks, Amy. And we did all notice the political change. We're all smiling here at the political change you've been through. So, Alan, what do you think? Pessimistic or optimistic?
Oh, definitely optimistic. I think the future looks bright for project management. I think organisations and governments need to implement change to get us all back to where we need to be. And the only way you can do that is by using project management effectively and basically looking after the scarce resource. I always use the word scarce resource because there's never enough resource to do the change that organizations need. I would actually have to say though that organizations and governments, they need to basically take on board the research that's been done by various organizations on why projects fail and make sure they don't make the same mistakes. A perfect example is that using lessons learned. What went wrong in one project, build in another, and don't regard it as project management theory.
Thanks, Alan. Really important. Optimistic that things are going to continue on the right direction. Janice, I'm coming over to you. I don't know if you can hear.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. Yeah, definitely optimistic. Definitely optimistic. I'm all for change, for the better and innovation. Definitely optimistic, Shaban.
Fantastic, thank you. Sonia, we started with you, we're going to end with you. What's your thoughts?
Thank you. As with the other panel members, optimism is the word of the day. And from our perspective, if we need to be as efficient as possible, then the only way to do that is by adopting a projectized or results-based approach, and project management method is the best way to achieve that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sonia. Thank you so much to all our panel members, to Janice, to Alan, to Amy, to Sonia, to Axelos for being our knowledge partner today, and to all of you who were watching as well. Thank you so much. We will be sending around a link with the video, and there will be a write-up from this event as well, so you can watch it all and read it all over again, which I'm sure you will, and share it with your colleagues. But for now, thanks to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.